Okay, so for this video, we're going to look at metabolism and really most importantly, blood sugar levels and how we regulate that. So when we consume food, we absorb it and we break it down through a process called catabolism. So that's going from large molecules. We're going to break those into smaller molecules called ATP. Okay, and other smaller nutrients, amino acids, and stuff like that. Okay. Then you have the building up of molecules, which we call anabolism. You've probably heard of anabolic steroids. That means to build. And we could take, let's say, amino acids, and we can build those into larger molecules called proteins. Now, every time we have reactions, we lose heat, and that's the reason why we heat up when we're working out and stuff like that. But those are the two forms of metabolism. Catabolism, which is the breakdown into smaller molecules, such as like the food that we eat. And then anabolism is us building stuff back up. So when you eat proteins, you break it down into simple amino acids, and then your body builds it back up into the proteins that it needs. Okay, really fast to go through our three types of food items, characteristics. You have carbohydrates, you have lipids, and then you have fats. The carbohydrates is our first energy source, and that's really straight sugar. So you go from your basic sugars and you build it all the way up to your starches, which you can see here in the picture. If you have way too much sugar in your blood, it's what we call hyperglycemic or hyperglycemia. You can always think of hyper. You give a kid a lot of sugar, they run around like crazy. So there's a lot of sugar in their blood. Okay. Hypoglycemia means low blood sugar. And we see these two things with people that have issues with it, with insulin issues or diabetes. All right, but that's just a quick little overview of carbohydrates. And the two forms that we see with people mostly is either they're hyperglycemic, meaning they have too much sugar in their blood and their body can't really store it, or hypoglycemia, which means their body is not releasing stored sugar to keep their blood sugar up. You also have fats. Fats is your second choice for energy if you don't have carbohydrates. And really, we need fats for a lot of different things, but most importantly, it's for cell membranes. And what we look at here is let's say you're stranded on an island, your body would use all the carbohydrates it has available, then it would burn through its fats, and then lastly, it would take out the protein. So you'd start losing a lot of muscle mass after that. Okay? Proteins are made of amino acids. I think we kind of covered that in our last virtual lab. You have something called 8 essential amino acids. You really need to consume 20, or we need 20. There's 20 amino acids. We need to make sure we consume 8 essential amino acids. So the other 12 our body pretty much makes on its own. But there's 8 that we need to consume in our diet. And we have a pretty well-rounded diet, so we don't have to worry about that. But less developed countries, they struggle with this because they don't have a wide variety of food to consume from, or they're just not consuming enough food. So lucky for us, we are taking in all 20 amino acids and we're able to produce them. And those 8 essential amino acids we have to make sure that we're taking in. So how does our pancreas and liver really regulate our blood sugar? And you have two chemicals that are used. One is called insulin, and one is called glucagon. Now, insulin you've probably heard of a lot, and insulin gets released from the pancreas. So if we look right here, okay, now when we consume food, our blood sugar goes up. Okay, so let's start here. This will be step 1. Okay, so you consume food, that food gets broken down, and those sugars get absorbed into our bloodstream. So our blood sugar goes up. We don't want to be hyperglycemic. So what our body will do is it will store that excess sugar that we don't need at the moment. So the pancreas will release insulin, and that causes extra sugar to get stored in the form of glycogen. So glycogen, you could think of it as a whole bunch of glucose getting stuck together and stored inside of that liver. Okay, so once again, if our blood sugar goes up, That's step one. What's going to happen is step two, the pancreas will release insulin, and that insulin will form glycogen through the sticking together of glucose. So a bunch of glucose molecules will be removed from the blood and will be stored as glycogen. Right? We don't want to waste sugar. We want to store it. So people that have insulin issues, if their body's not producing enough insulin, sometimes they get insulin injections so their blood sugar isn't crazy high all the time. Okay. On the flip side of that, if our blood sugar is too low, what will normally happen, so here's our new step one. If blood sugar is low, what's going to happen is our pancreas is going to release something called glucagon, and glucagon causes the reverse of what insulin does. So it's going to take glycogen and it's going to turn that into glucose and it's going to spit that out into our bloodstream. So one more time with raising our glucose levels. We start at 1. This is where we are right now. Our blood sugar starts to drop. What our body will normally do is the pancreas, there's step 2. Pancreas will release glucagon. That will then trigger the liver. Step 3, we'll label this step 3. The glucagon will trigger the liver to break glycogen down into glucose, and that will hopefully balance out our blood sugar levels. Okay, so constantly, right now inside of your body as well, your body's doing one of the two things. If you're just eating or you just ate, your body is using insulin to store some of that excess glucose. And if you haven't eaten in, let's say, an hour or two, your pancreas is going to be releasing a little bit of glucagon, and it's going to be breaking that glycogen into glucose. So if we look at this one more time, which I'm going to kind of erase as much of this as possible. This is an important little aspect. Okay, so blood sugar goes up. Your pancreas will release insulin. That will then cause that excess glucose in your blood to be made into glycogen for later use. If our blood sugar drops, we need to regulate that back to normal. So the pancreas, right here, is going to produce glucagon. That glucagon then causes glycogen to get broken down into its basic units, which is glucose. And that glucose will then raise the blood sugar back up. So it's kind of like they have pictured your body's constantly going through this seesaw effect. Right now, diabetics, people that are having issues with releasing enough insulin, they need to get insulin injections sometimes, or if their body cannot produce glucagon, or their blood sugar drops regularly, they may need like fruit juices or some type of sugary substance to get into their bloodstream to then raise their blood sugar back up. Okay. Last thing is for this session is how we form, or what the terms are, I should say, for producing this glucose. So glycogenesis, the word genesis means to make. So the formation of glycogen is called glycogenesis. Right? So if we go back to the slide before that, where is the formation of glycogen happening? Formation of glycogen is happening up here. Okay, so that's the use of the hormone or chemical insulin causes the formation of glycogen. So glucose to glycogen. So that's glycogenesis. Glycogenolysis, lyse, or to lyse something, means to split. So that would be glycogen being split into glucose. And that's what that chemical or hormone glucagon does. So here, that second one, glycogenolysis, is happening at the bottom. And lastly, gluconeogenesis is when we form glucose from anything that's not a sugar. So when we're breaking down those fats or proteins, we would call that gluconeogenesis.